Some of the biggest turning points in history, they hinge on a single moment. But what if that moment wasn't a battle, but a setup? What if the fate of an entire subcontinent was sealed, not by an army, but by a corporate conspiracy built on lies?
Okay, just look at this for a second. June 23rd, 1757. On one side, you have the ruler of Bengal, Nawab Siraj-ud-Daulah, with a massive army of about 50,000 men. And on the other, the British East India Company, led by a guy named Robert Clive, with a tiny force of just 3,000. I mean, on paper, this isn't even a fight. It should have been an absolute slaughter.
So the big question is, how on earth did this happen? How did this tiny little army not only survive, but win a victory that would literally reshape the world map? Well, the answer has nothing to do with brilliant military tactics or better guns. The real story is one of greed, betrayal, and a secret plot hatched long before a single shot was fired.
To really get how this all went down, we need to understand who the two main players were in this incredible high-stakes game.
So on your left, you've got Robert Clive. He's this incredibly ambitious, totally ruthless guy working for the British East India Company. And let's be clear, this was a corporation, a trading company with its own private army. And on the right, you see Siraj-ud-Daulah. He was the young and frankly pretty hot-headed ruler of Bengal, which at the time was one of the wealthiest places on the entire planet.
So the trouble really started when the company began building up its forts in Calcutta without asking the Nawab for permission. Siraj-ud-Daulah, who was rightly a little suspicious of what they were up to, told them to knock it off. The British just refused. So the Nawab did exactly what any ruler would do. He marched his army in and took back his own city.
And right after the city was captured, we get the infamous Black Hole of Calcutta incident. A bunch of British prisoners died overnight in a tiny dungeon. Now, whether the Nawab knew about it or not is still debated, but the story spread like wildfire back in Britain. It was the perfect justification for the East India Company to not just retake Calcutta, but to demand a massive payday and get some revenge.
Okay, so this is where the story takes a really sharp turn. Clive and his forces retook Calcutta, sure, but he knew that a full-on war against the Nawab's entire army was a huge risk, so he decided to play a different game entirely.
He realized the key to winning wasn't on the battlefield, it was inside the Nawab's own court. He figured, if I can't beat his army, maybe I can make sure most of it doesn't even show up to the fight. He started looking for a traitor.
And boy, did he find the perfect candidate in Mir Jafar. This was the Nawab's own top general, his commander-in-chief, but he felt disrespected and was hungry for power. So Clive made him a very simple offer. Stand down during the battle, let us win, and we will make you the new Nawab of Bengal. Mir Jafar was in.
But then, just when everything was falling into place, they hit a snag. A rich merchant named Chand found out about the secret deal, and he threatened to go straight to the Nawab and spill the beans, unless he got a huge piece of the action. We're talking millions of dollars in today's money. Suddenly, the whole plot was about to blow up.
So to deal with this blackmail, Clive comes up with an absolutely brilliant and completely cynical plan. He has two treaties drawn up. The real one, on white paper, had all the actual details from Mir Jafar and, of course, no mention of Chand. But then he created a fake treaty on red paper, and this one had the massive bribe for Chand written right into it. He got all the conspirators to sign both treaties, even forging an admiral's signature on the fake one, and then he showed the red treaty to Chand to keep him quiet.
And get this, years later, when the British Parliament questioned him about this act of forgery, Clive was totally unapologetic. He basically said, deceiving a great villain like that wasn't just good strategy, it was justice. I mean, that tells you everything you need to know about the mindset here.
So, with the conspiracy back on track, Clive marches his tiny army to face the Nawab's enormous force near a village called Plassey. The stage was now set for one of the strangest battles in all of history. So here we are, June 23rd, 1757. Clive's little army is hunkered down in a mango grove. And as you can see from this map, they are just completely surrounded. The Nawab's army forms this huge crescent shape around them. It looks like an impossible situation.
So the battle goes on for about 11 hours, but almost none of it is actual fighting. At 8 a.m., things kick off. But critically, the biggest parts of the Nawab's army, the parts controlled by Mir Jafar and the other conspirators, they just stand there. They don't move. Then, around noon, a huge stroke of luck for the British. A massive downpour soaks the Nawab's gunpowder, which they had foolishly left out in the open. The British, well, they brought tarps. A little while later, the Nawab's one truly loyal general is killed by a stray cannonball. The Nawab panics, his traitorous commanders tell him to run, and he does. By 5 p.m., with their leader gone, the rest of the army just dissolves and melts away. the battle was over. The fighting might have stopped, but the consequences of that bizarre day were just getting started. This was so much more than a victory. It was the birth of something entirely new. And just as planned, Clive met with Mir Jafar. This famous painting captures the moment he salutes him as the new Nawab of Bengal. The deal was done. Mir Jafar got his throne, but everyone knew he was now just a puppet, totally controlled by the British East India Company.
And what about the old Nawab? Well, his fate was sealed. Siraj-ud-Daulah was caught a few days later trying to escape. And to make sure his father's new position was secure, Mir Jafar's son had him killed almost immediately.
So, let's talk about the payout, because that's what this was all about. The company got huge new chunks of territory and was awarded 22 million rupees, an absolutely insane amount of money at the time. Oh, and Omichund, the guy who tried to blackmail them, when he was told the Red Treaty was a fake and he was getting nothing, the story goes that the shock literally drove him insane.
And this is why it all really matters. The Battle of Plassey is seen as the moment everything changed. It was the unofficial start of nearly 200 years of British rule in India. It's the point where a trading company became an empire.
All that money they took from Bengal's treasury, that became the war chest for the company's expansion. It gave them the cash to kick out their European rivals, like the French and the Dutch, and then, piece by piece, conquer the rest of the Indian subcontinent. A hostile corporate takeover had turned into an imperial one.
Which really leaves you with one final, pretty heavy question. The foundation of the British Empire in India wasn't some glorious battle. It was a backroom deal built on forgery, bribery, and betrayal. And it just makes you wonder, if an empire starts with a lie, can it ever really last?